I'm going to make a very simple statement about this, what we're studying. Always remember, we're starting from the ground up. We're taking a worm's eye view of the whole of reality. But in sacred theology, that other science that deals with God, as he's revealed himself, he takes a bird's eye view of whole. We get a bird's eye view of the whole of reality, put it that way. We're taking a worm's eye view. Oh, we're not on the air, so excuse me a second.
I think it's going.
What's going on? Yeah. We're taking a worm's eye view of everything. We start from the ground upwards. But with the sacred theology, where God has revealed himself, that's another question. That's not our field. Then we're taking a bird's eye view or a God's eye view of the whole of reality. One thing about what we're talking about is going limited regress. We're not talking about dependence in time, like dominoes, one pushing the other, or something like that, or going back in time. We're not concerned about that. We're concerned about direct influence. One flash, here and now, as it were, proceeding from God directly to us, or from that uncaused cause directly to us. So if you think that time comes into it, you've missed the point. Just think of that influence as being dependent right here and now. The here and now is a little misplaced, but however. So think about that, my friends, and think about that dependence. Remember, an infinite series, and that's where lots of people get mixed up. A Jewish classmate of mine said in Montreal, he said that now, just remember, it was 1958 when I went there. I think it was 1957 or was it 1958 that the Russians put the Sputnik up in the air. 57, wasn't it? Yes. Well, they'd put that up there. Now, my friend Yehuda said to me, he said, oh, well, now we know that the infinite can exist. It's going to go around infinitely and never stop. He hasn't got a notion of the infinite to talk like that. But if you can grasp that notion that the unfinished, no matter what series you've got to have a first. A greater cannot come out of a lesser. You cannot have an infinite series. It doesn't make sense. So read that there. Joey's dependent upon Bill for his existence, not for his generation. So that's an accidental consideration.
What page are you on, please?
Pardon?
What page are you on, please?
Well, that's page 88 that's mentioned there. So remember, the argument depends on essential subordination, not accidental subordination. If some movement exists, the principles of reason show us that whatever undergoes any kind of movement is moved by another. There cannot be an infinite series. So we've got a summary of the first way on page 89. I won't apologize for having given you various simplified versions of the different proofs. I've done that. We come to the third way. I think I've got 3 simplified versions. My reasoning is this. There's always some aspect that appeals to somebody. Remember, you might see the first one clearly, but another person sees the second one clearly. I remember Dr. Kinsella, whose work earned the Nobel Prize for the chemico-humoral theory of transmission of nerve energy. And he said to me, he was a student with me and under me just for a short time. And he said that you can explain something sometimes 9 ways. And the person's trying to grasp it. The 10th way they might just be the very one they need. And somebody once said, the best person to teach beginners is often somebody who has just recently been a beginner himself. Yes, but that has certain dangers sometimes, unfortunately. So look that over on page 89, and you see a summary of the first way. Then we come to the uncaused cause. And since the uncaused cause has no potency, it's pure act. I'll mention that here, though it really belongs to later. It's pure act. And what's the ultimate act? Be. So it's a pure act of be. If you want to write the name of God on the board, just write that, just the word be. And even when Moses, on the mountain, what did he say? Who are you, Lord? He said, what did the Lord say? He said, I am who am. Am is my name. Pardon? He asked the Lord, who are you? Who will I tell the boys I play cards with who you are? He said, I am who am. Am is my name. Be. The verb to be. So my ultimate explanation is be. But Aristotle defined him as intellection, a pure act of intellection. Not an intelligent being, he didn't describe him as that. A pure act of intellection that doesn't go from can think to does think, but is pure act of thinking. He defined it as a thinking on a thinking. In other words, it's a pure act of thinking that's thinking about its own thinking. So the ancient Greeks concluded that he wouldn't be thinking about me, he's thinking about his own thinkings. They came to that for a reason. And Aristotle wasn't a Christian. Remember I explained to you about the existence of Christ. I think I mentioned here one night that Tacitus, who never was a Christian, in the histories he wrote, he talked about Christ as existing. But H.G. Wells doubted there was such a person who did exist. But certainly Tacitus knew he existed. Well, Aristotle wasn't a Christian either. But he talked more about God in an excellent fashion than most Catholics I've ever, or Christians of any kind that I've ever met. So he's the first mover. I was very pleased. I nearly wasn't going to give you this one on page 89, but I was very pleased it came out all right. Now I've given you there St. Thomas's version too. I intend later to give you all of St. Thomas in copying out of one of the books about his summa. Now all the elements are there. They were so well known in his day they didn't need to elaborate on them. He just laid them out, and the minds were so beautifully prepared. I've told you this before, I think, that in those days they had the trivium. They studied rhetoric, grammar, and logic. What are the three again? Logic, pardon?
Yes.
Rhetoric's a part of logic.
Logic, rhetoric, grammar.
Grammar, that's it. Logic, grammar, and rhetoric. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, the idea was to prepare the mind first. To prepare the mind. Then up to 16 years of age, that's all they studied. But they did it in Latin, by the way. Then after that, they'd take on the quadrivium. And boy, what marvellous stuff. Teach medieval philosophy, as I've had to do, and you'll see just how sharp the minds were, including the Arabs, like Al-Ghazal and men like that. Averroes made terrible blunders and upset the whole medieval period. But his stuff had depth that he talked about things that men don't even know the existence of today. In philosophical psychology, they'll deal with the imagination and the memory. They know nothing about the sense consciousness and the cogitative power. You don't find them in the books that we had to look at for empirical psychology. So, my friends, they had wonderful minds. So the elements set out here have been set out with the knowledge that the students would know exactly as soon as he mentioned something what was meant by that. Now, set out Father Woodbury, his presentation of the first way, a technical way. I studied under him for about 18 years, my friends. Even when I graduated from Montreal, I still studied under him. I'd listen to him, and then I'd go and teach a class after him. And he always had me as standby for when he was getting sicknesses in his later days, to take his classes over, both philosophical and theological. But Woodbury, I studied under many great men. That's why I was brought to North America. I don't want it to sound self-serving, but I'm saying that for a reason. Regis, Geiger, Lachance, Martinelli. These were top men in their fields. Dr. Ferrari studied at Quebec City. Can't think of the name of them just for a minute. And he said that Woodbury did more for him than all his 9 professors put together. I had men from Paris, men from the United States and all different parts of Europe, and Canadians teaching, French Canadians, etc. But Woodbury did more for me in one night than many of these men did in a whole semester. He was a great man. He set out the proofs of the spirituality of the human intellect in a magnificent way, and the freedom of will in a unique way. The Dominican fathers from the Philippines saw this when 3 of us went to see them one time about the possible studying in the Philippines, which I was contemplating at the time. And they marveled at the magnificence of Woodbury's text. So Woodbury set this out, these proofs out. He always set the things out in such a manner. He said to me when I was going away to study, he said, try and see not that such and such is true, but why it must be true. So consequently, we developed the defensive attitude of, if you say that, then you've crossed this, or you've negated that. And there's only one philosophy that can stand on its 2 feet fully, and that's Thomistic philosophy. But as I've said before, like Léon Blois said in Paris, il n'y a que 2 philosophies, le thomisme et le bullshitisme.
I understood that one.
There are only 2 philosophies, Thomism and bullshitism. And after a lifetime of study, I can find no fault with that statement. Woodbury quoted that many times. Every philosophy has some truth. Oh yes. Every philosophy has some truth. Otherwise nobody paid any attention to it. Even men like Freud and Marx and Hume, who wrote silly things, they nevertheless wrote something true, or nobody listened to it. It's like the what was that recently? Something about where was that? Oh, I think it was a politician in Lockport years ago. I won't mention his name. He said something about certain laws we have to accept, even though they've got some bad condition or statement in them, some part of them is not good, and they're dealing with abortion and things like that. Nevertheless, we have to pass them because of the goodness in them. I said, sir, if I offered you an apple and I said, oh, it's beautiful, nutritious, this apple, don't take any notice of the razor blades, that's beside the point. Just eat it because of nutrition. It shook him. He didn't know what to say after that. I better not mention his name. It startled him. And he did thank me later for coming up to talk to him after, because he thought I was going to cut his throat with the razor blade.
What's his name?
That's right. Would you like French fries with that? So there are different objections. Most of them are based upon Kant or Hume. Hume, I've told you before, if a billiard ball, this is the very example he uses, if one billiard ball strikes another, we can have no idea of a necessary connection between one billiard ball hitting it and the other one moving. This is his famous objection, which disturbed Kant and brought him out of what he called his dogmatic slumber. But he assumed by saying we have no idea of necessary connection, for idea for Hume was just an image. He's right. We can't just imagine it, but we can understand the dependence from potency to act. Hume knew nothing about potency and act. We can observe no necessary connection. You understand it, you don't just observe it. But that has thrown the whole English world. As Martinelli said to me years ago, he said, all our philosophy in this contemporary world is based upon the metaphysics of Hume. Hume had no metaphysics, of course, that's what he's referring to. The other one that went astray was Kant. Do you know, there are books we have, specialists on Kant and Kant's writings. What's that very famous specialist? Can you remember his name? The one that did the big translations we have, you and I have them?
Kant?
Yes. Can't think of his name, but anyway, that doesn't matter. You see, once we both pass 90, we sort of forget those things. But Kemp Smith, that's it. They don't pay attention to the fundamental error of Kant. Now, he's only 85, I'm 95. Don't pay attention to the error of Kant. Kant said, my tree plus what we know is the idea. What's he mean by the idea? A composite of the tree and my mind. Something in my mind compounded with the tree. That's what we know according to Kant. So how much comes from the tree? How much comes from my mind? Ultimately, we really cannot know or be sure. Therefore, the principles of reason that we've been mentioning tonight, we can't know them. We can't know. We know they apply to our minds. Oh yes, we can say that. But do they apply out there? We don't know, says Kant. Result is, you cannot argue from principles to prove the existence of God, but we'll accept the existence of God because it's a convenience. Now, modern philosophers have all fallen for that, very uncritically. I think it was Father Woodbury years ago that said there's more fashion amongst philosophers than there are amongst women with their hats. Or as I think a certain psychiatrist who will be listening to this, I won't mention his name, because he gets the discs, he has said more variations and fashions amongst psychiatrists than there are psychiatrists. So there's a lot of fashions going on. It's the same in philosophy, all fashions. One minute they're all logical positivists, next minute they're all linguistic analysts, and then they come down to, what are they today? I don't know, they don't think they know themselves. So consequently, the rigour of the Middle Ages, of the thinking, I'll show you a book if you want to really know what it's about. There's one beautiful big book which I used as a textbook with the Jewish, the Arabian, the Greek and the Romans, all the philosophers say they're famous essential writings in it. And believe me, there's a lot of difficulty and rubbish written amongst philosophers. But in the medieval period, those great Greeks, or the Greeks before that, of course, or even the Greeks in the medieval period, the early medieval period, and the Arabs, are the ones that gave great pestilence to the church, like Averroes, and the Persian, Avicenna. These, of course, are Latinized names, they're not the original Arabic names, but they were great thinkers. Great thinkers. It takes a great philosopher to make a great error. Never forget that. But they disputed big questions, not trivial questions today, whether a period should have come before this word or after it. So they're the objections on page 91. And I've given you David Hume's own words. I put them together from different sections of his book, one of his books, page 63. And on page 92 of our text, the principle why we say one billiard ball hits another, this principle is custom or habit. We say it's a habit we've found that one billiard ball proceeds when the other hits it. But is there a necessary connection? We have, to use his words, where are they? The mind feels no sentiment. It's the second down on page, second full paragraph on page 92. Two-thirds of the way through that second paragraph. The mind feels no sentiment or inward impression from this succession of objects. Consequently, there is not in any single particular instance of cause and effect anything which can suggest the idea of power or necessary connection. I have tested people, little children and others. I've talked to them about things like this, and I've said silly things to them. If you hit a stick with a stone with a stick, is the stone the reason to think? Of course it is. Oh, a little child wouldn't think otherwise. And one of those men that I admire so much, farmers, who have their 2 feet on the ground, dig the earth up and know the elements and how to treat animals, etc. I've always said farming is about the most perfect profession. They've got to be agriculturalists, they've got to be, Tommy? Geologists. Tommy's a geologist. And they've got to be veterinary surgeons for the cattle, etc.
Meteorologists.
Pardon?
Meteorologists.
Meteorologists, yes.
Environmentalists.
Environmentalists.
They won't play if they're environmentalists.
almost a perfect profession. But as a pharmacist, or pharmaceutical chemist, I worked a lot with physicians. I think I better leave it unsaid. Go a little outside the prescription, they know nothing. And they hold the most absurd, how shall I put it, opinions of things. Yet some of the men I've known have been excellent philosophers. Dr. Kinsella, Dr. Pius. These have been wonderful philosophers. Skinny Pius, I remember him, he's so thin, head of a most modern Catholic hospital in Australia, probably the best in the Southern Hemisphere. And he said once to a man who was a Freemason, he said, the Freemason said to him, Dr. Pius, do you think there's a God? And this man, I met him, I knew out west, but I met him later at a wedding. He said, he was startled by what Dr. Pius said. I'm more sure there's a God than I am that you're standing there. It shook him right down to his boots, he told me. He never forgot that. So there's David Hume and Immanuel Kant, the great German and the great Englishman, who was not an Englishman but a Scotsman. And the English have never forgiven him for that. There were three men, Locke, Bishop Berkeley and David Hume. John Locke was a physician. He was called the great common sense philosopher. And Bishop Berkeley and David Hume. All three of them existed like one man who lived a long time. Each developed the philosophy of the ones who went before him. Listen to Bishop Berkeley's proof of the existence of God. What does it mean that I can to know something? What does it mean for something to exist? He wrote it in Latin. The only part of his Latin, esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. To be, for something to exist, means I can see it. To be is to be perceived. That's a strange thing to say. So somebody said to him, all right, Bishop Berkeley, you just arrived on your horse. The horse is out in the stables. We're not perceiving it. Ah, said Berkeley, therefore it's necessary to have a God who perceives things at all times. Am I describing Berkeley pretty faithfully, aren't I? Yet, he's an English philosopher that everybody paid attention to. He came to this East Coast some part of his lifetime. He started a school or something, or a college or something in Jamaica, I think it was. And he wrote beautifully. Those men in those days wrote very beautifully. David Hume, I've seen his handwriting in the British Museum. Although, even their handwriting, I wish I could imitate it. They'd look at me and say, hell. But they also expressed themselves very beautifully in their English. It was very beautiful. I've got pretty well most of their books at home. But as philosophers, they were cut off from the past. Philosophy was developing. Ancient Greece, where the cradle of Western civilization was. Ancient Greece, right back to the days of Anaxagoras and men like that and Thales, and gradually was building up. And after the barbarian invasions settled down about the 9th century, then Europe started to flower. So much so that Father Walsh wrote a beautiful book called The 13th, the Greatest of Centuries. It was marvellous. I've been studying the economics of that period. I published an article on it. And it's marvellous what they could do. And according to the English, Protestant Englishmen, they had a wealth in those days that's not known today. It's amazing. The food, the clothing, the furniture. It's an eye-opener. Yet you get some bigot who'll write about the Middle Ages and say, oh, they didn't have enough sewage, or they didn't wash properly, or some other thing. But overlooking how the people were well supplied. And it was an official man who's the Lord something or other in England, I've forgotten what his name is now, Fortescue or something, and he was, I've forgotten his position, a very high position, writing for the king. And he pointed out that everybody had a plentiful sufficiency. And as Dr. Pierce has pointed out, the English penny kept its value for 400 years. Kept its value for 400 years. And he said people were provided for, marriage endowments, education, all sorts of things. So, and he's got, in Dr. Pierce's book and Walsh's book, it has details of how much you could earn a day, how much to do this, how much to do that, how much to... Everybody had a gallon or a gallon and a half of ale every day. Man, I wish I lived then. Yes. Yes. I think it was a gallon and a half. It was their daily ration. Their children were provided for with education, woolen goods, furniture covered with wool and woolen clothing, an extraordinary amount of stuff. And I was in a hospital. I went into a pharmacy to buy some, while travelling I like to keep up my vitamin supply, and I went into a pharmacy in, what's the city in England? It's a rather Elizabethan city, Chester. Went into a pharmacy, and the man said to get the vitamins, and I said, the girl wanted to talk to me about, to advise me of something. I said, I am a pharmacist myself. Oh, you must meet the manager or the owner. So I met him. He said, would you like to see our hospital? He took me in the pharmacy, downstairs, and here's a hospital under the ground. Had become covered apparently over the centuries. A medieval hospital. I've got, I think, oh, did I have a camera with me? I can't remember. But it's beautiful, vaulted ceilings. And all these beautiful columns. Something like you'd see in Spain, the Alhambra, or something like that. Beautiful things. And the idea was that they had a plentiful supply of air, and they weren't looking at other persons who were sick in a bed next to them, and all that sort of thing. Privacy. It was amazing. Walsh has written on that sort of thing, and so has Dr. Pierce. Dr. Pierce was a medical practitioner.
What was the name of Pierce's book?
Value, Normal and Morbid. Now, I'm going to speak about that sometime to you, about two kinds of values in the economic order. There's a normal value. For instance, if I buy wheat to sell it, or if I buy wheat to stop you from selling it, that's an abnormal value. That's a morbid value. We'll talk about that another time. And Father Walsh's book, I put out, I have pages extracted from these that I give, but this is not the right place, of course, in this particular study. But anyway, they had time too. Look at the great cathedrals of England. I know, I'm sorry, I'm wandering from the subject a bit, but the great cathedrals of England, we can't build them now. St Mary's Cathedral, a magnificent Gothic cathedral in the city, Australia, where I originated. I was there just recently. And in the last 3 or 4, 5 years, they added the steeple, which they didn't have before. Couldn't afford to put them up. All over the world, they tell me it's like that. Be in the Cathedral of Cologne in Germany, the great cathedral there. Magnificent. Look, you stand at the foot of columns and you can hardly see the ceiling. It's so great. You've seen that, Professor Powers, haven't you?
Yes.
You can hardly... magnificent. The buttresses, the carvings. Chartres in France, the Cathedral of Chartres. As you're coming towards the town of Chartres, you see the spires first. They're two odd spires, and the Germans used them as observation points during the Second World War. But the carvings in there, they could afford to give the time then, with about anywhere between, say, 100 and 160 public holidays, apart from other days. They were holy days of obligation. So don't ever rubbish the medieval period in front of me, please. I'll give you some text. I want you to think about them. So there we are. We've seen the objections. Now on page 93, I want you to look at what's coming ahead of us. This is sort of a preview. You know, like they show at the movies, they show you a preview of something to come and you just look at it and say, thank God I saw that. I won't be coming. By the way, a certain person in the class invited me to come to a movie in Lockport. How many people from Lockport here? Come on, Tweety Bird. So they mentioned what was coming up, Ratatouille. And I said, oh no, kids' movies, you know. Flying from Australia to Sydney this past few weeks, what did they show us? Ratatouille. I recommend it. You've just got to see it. It's a magnificent cartoon, more human than cartoon in a way. It's splendidly developed, wasn't it, Jenna? You haven't seen it, have you? No. Ratatouille. It was quite funny. I couldn't believe it when it came on the screen on the plane. You know, I'm one of those that travels around the world and lie awake for every minute up on the plane. One time, 5 movies. I watched the whole 5. So, my friends, on page 93, once you've understood the first way, the others will come easy. The first, number 4 is the more difficult one, but we'll deal with that. The first way, you can see on page 93, how we argue from, I'm showing you how the movement takes place here. But when we're arguing, we argue in the reverse order, from the movement in the stone back to the unmoved mover. Now the second way operates the same way, but the uncaused cause this time. The uncaused cause causes the hand to move the axe to make the gash in the tree. Now remember this, here's a principle that's assumed here, it's involved here, but it'll be more developed later. Diverse things are not from themselves united. But if they're found to be in union, then there's some one cause causing them. This is called the henological principle, from the Greek hen, meaning one. Did I pronounce that correctly, Father? Hen? Near enough? So, henological. Henological principle is called. This, for instance, spoon plus heat. These two are not found united from themselves. They're united by another. It's another way of expressing causality. Spoon can be without the heat. So it's not from itself is it united with heat. Therefore, there's some one cause of their union. That's the onifying principle, or henological principle. They're oneified, they're unionized. Not unionized, but unified. Unified. So that's the same with the second way. We've got to explain how the tree come to get the gash. I got a tree with a gash in it. It's just because I can't steer a lawnmower correctly. So I kicked my lawnmower and then he broke a toe to it. Then the third way, the tree plus B. The tree itself didn't give itself existence, yet we know it didn't exist once, and we know we can burn it down. I got a tree on my property. If you can't believe that, come and see the tree I've got now. It's just falling apart. So the tree and its B are not from themselves united, because it can be without its B, without its existence. So we argue back to a pure B. Now this third way is the professional philosopher's big proof. The others are all applications of that third way. The third way is the way of proving the existence of God. You'll see that from what I've given you. A number of ways expressed. I think about 4 or 5 ways I've given you all together. Now the fourth way is a little more difficult. There are things out there, there are perfections. Take the transcendental properties. Beauty, trueness, oneness, goodness. Little dog is good, but little Betty with her curly hair and freckles on her nose, she's more good. Then a young man that's grown up and has a virtuous soul, he's even more good. So there are degrees of perfection. Yet none of them have that beauty. None of them are that beauty. They all have it, and in varying degrees. So none of them are beauty itself. They're all havers of beauty and limited beauty. Therefore, we argue back to a pure beautiful. Didn't Plato say that? Look back in your notes. Plato said, there is an ultimate beautiful, a pure beautiful. Some truths are greater than others. This is a great truth. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. This is a greater truth. Nothing can be and not be at the same time, under the same respect. That's the supreme principle. Or if you like, between being and non-being, there's no middle. They're great truths. They're the greatest truth. And amongst things, there are great truths. But we argue back, there must be a greatest truth. That being which is truth itself. You know, when I was at Niagara University, there were some people didn't like my teaching. I was very relieved to hear that. You can't be wrong about everything, but when they, they're all opposing you, they particularly hated my ethics. But, yeah, Dr. Bonnet and I both took that. One man one day said, "Do you think you have the truth?" And I said, "I think I've got some truths." He said, "God is truth, only God is truth." I want to say to him, "Prove it." But I couldn't be so cruel. You could have nailed him to the wall with that. Prove it. They didn't understand that you see, too many people think that philosophers believe what they teach. Or, I think this. Don't ever say to me, what are your philosophical opinions? Or what are your opinions in philosophy? Because I'll bite the hand off you. Then spit it out. We don't believe things, we conclude things. What are your conclusions? I mentioned before to you, people say, "Do you believe in God?" And I immediately say, I don't like the word belief. No, I don't believe in God. I know with utter certitude that he exists. But I put down the principal mode of the supreme principle which we apply here. In the first way, you'll see the principle there. These diagrams, my friend, took a lot of hard work to produce, believe me. Many of them I'd produced before, but some of them I had to rewrite them. And I've spent the whole week just getting the pages you've got to editing them, and then you get them all right, and then suddenly you find the computer, my darn computer's dyslexic. It can't spell at all. I have to go correct its spelling. I have to nurse made it or nurse feed it after or for hours of work. And then, you have to say, you see a word out of place or something like that, and you say, oh, that's not the word I should be using. Just before I sent these pages out today, I changed a whole lot of words just on one of the proofs. I thought, I can say that a better way. And I don't want this to be recorded, but it will be. I copied a couple of things out of a book, and I altered a few things like St. Thomas's and Hume's statements, etc. I altered a word here and there. And one of them, by altering a few words, I translated it myself from the Latin. Then the fifth way deals with order. Now this comes close to Bishop Paley's argument. His argument is this, that basically it's this. Beautiful order in the whole universe. Magnificent order. The stars, everything orderly, and physicists marvel at that. That's what keeps the physicists going, I do believe. About the magnificent order. They're right. But as St. Thomas and others say, you cannot prove the existence of God from that. What you do is you take a particular aspect of order. For instance, the eye is ordered towards seeing. The intellect is ordered towards thinking. That, you go in particular. Now you can prove the existence of God. We'll see that when we come to it in detail. And you've got some pages there too. So, that comes close to Paley's argument, but as I think the philosophers have always said, it's non-apodictic if you follow it the way that Bishop Paley stated. And I tried to correct one man from doing that on radio or television or whatever he was doing again, I've forgotten now, and didn't listen to him. That's all right for the imaginative person. Most people think with their imaginations. Only 1 in 12 think with their intellects. And consequently, most people tend to think, like in abortion, for instance, oh, you're killing a little child. There's a much more fundamental argument than that, but they won't have that, or don't want to hear that. So, if we wish to deny these proofs, we have to attack the fact of movement, or the proper principle, like whatever undergoes movement is moved by another, or the common principle in a series of essentially dependent movers. There's no regress to infinity, no infinite regress. Or you have to deny the logical connection between them, the nexus. So I have said that to persons who are atheists. Which are you denying? Well, I think I told you this before. And they said, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, said one man. I said, no, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So they can't deny the fact of movement because their very denial is a movement. If they deny the other principles, and note this, principles of reason are not provable. They're defensible. You can't prove them because they're so fundamental, there's nothing more fundamental to prove them from. And in logic, you have to prove something from something more obvious, more evident. But they are the most evident. There's nothing more fundamental. So what you do is you show to deny it leads you into contradiction. The supreme principle is this. Between B and non-B, there's no middle. That's one statement of it. There are three statements of it. I'm trying to think of the start of the word. Nothing can be and not be at the same time under the same respect. Or there's a third way, being is being, which means whatever is a being. Whatever is a being. That's the supreme principle, expressed three different ways. You'll find them on the sheets you've got, where you've got about, 40 fundamental principles of reason, which I gave out to you rather. So if they deny the principles, they're denying the supreme principle, because all principles go back to the first principle, the supreme principle. Nothing can be and not be together at the same time, under the same respect. That's the supreme principle of all. Some smart pants, and you always get these amongst students, says something about, just a sec, something about, but this is an apple, now it's not an apple, it's half an apple.
And
Dr. Bonnet.
It's not that they're lacking evidence, they are self-evident.
Self-evident, exactly. Evident from themselves. But the only thing you can do to defend them is to show that by denying them, you deny the supreme principle. There's a special part of philosophy called dealing with that, and we're going to deal with that in the last part of our course. Though it's a big subject itself, a year's course in itself, called Epistemology. Or more properly, as we defend, we use, that's used in Europe and North America. But we used defensive metaphysics, like Marquardt, his famous Latin work. Defensive metaphysics is a much better description of it. Epistemology can mean either defense of knowledge or the theory of knowledge. And the theory of knowledge belongs to philosophical psychology, not to metaphysics. Anyway, that's another technical blunder that some people have made. So I think we'll leave it there, my friends. But if you've understood the first way, notice you're prepared for the other four. Remember, either that first cause necessarily exists. Well, what we'd say so far, it necessarily moves others. They're all necessarily dependent, or nothing can move. And we'll see later that either God necessarily exists or nothing else can exist. Those proofs are infallibly true, and I use those words very carefully. If you don't think so, put the gloves on, because you've got to fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.